What's up, man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What's going on?
Doing all right. I can't complain. Just got in from across town. Just kind
Did
of
you
just been
work
chilling
today?
this weekend. No, I'm off. I'm off Saturdays and Sundays always now. I'm really
Oh,
happy
right.
about that. Yeah, my new job stresses always working Monday to Friday and work life balance. They're all about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's legit, and it makes good money.
Well, that's good for you.
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm
Sounds
finally.
perfect.
I'm finally going to be happy for the first time in like freaking 15 years. Not now, but in a couple months when things get into the groove. It's a startup. It's a brand new company. So, but it's essentially a franchise type of deal. It's pretty much I pretty much know what I'm in store for. So, kind of looking forward to it.
Good deal. Yeah. Is it like office kind of stuff?
Yep,
Yeah.
total office job. No cubicles though.
Right on. Oh,
Yeah,
good,
I'm,
man.
I'm
I'm
really happy
glad.
about it.
Happy for you. Do you
Oh,
like
it's
doing
so
it?
yeah. I mean, so far, I mean, everybody's kind of new, starting on the same footing. It's like a bunch. He's like it's hired a bunch of staff all kind of starting at the same time. So we're all like, I'm not like joining an office that's already been established. So it's kind of a cool experience.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not one of those things where like, yeah, we hired 12 people, which is basically what we did. And then we, like maybe like four or five of them are last. No, I mean, like we're all ready to rock and roll.
Well, hell yeah.
Hopefully, that's the plan is. Because I know I'll do all right. I think I'm gonna really enjoy it, but just need something, man. I just need something to. It's time for me to settle down. I mean, I'm not gonna do anything else other than settling down, but time for me to settle down for real. Have some roots.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it.
All right. Well, so we wanted to talk about what was it again? I know.
Uh, well, we could talk the
Yeah, I'm
nap
gonna
again
pull it
if
up.
we want to.
Okay.
Um, we could talk about Epstein slash Israel Palestine.
Yeah. Let's do that. Maybe a little bit, not a lot.
Yeah, and then terrorism was another one. Um, what was the other one? Oh, I wanted to. We didn't really delve into it too much because Brandon was popping in last time. But uh, what does Islam say about the use of force?
Yeah, I don't have much to say about that one, to be honest with you. I mean, it's kind of I don't want to say it's murky. It's kind of a mixed bag, and I'm not really I don't know if I'm really qualified to speak on it exactly. It's certainly nothing like the nap, but it's not necessarily not at the same time. It's a real mixed bag. But so I don't really know if there's anything in terms of actually in terms of defining things as aggression or initiation of force, stuff like that. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I
Right.
don't know if I'm really qualified on that, but definitely I'm just going over the list and everything. Obviously, like, so it's not like I have a huge political transformation, but just the way I like see things and describe things has
Oh
changed a
yeah, your
lot.
politics. That was the other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
authority versus liberty, liberalism versus conservatism, authority versus liberty. Definitely been wanting to talk about that.
Well, we can start off with that if you want.
Okay. Well, I'll just punt it to you to introduce the topic once we get the housekeeping out of the way.
All right, sounds good. I'll mute.
All right, let's roll right into it. And we're back. Welcome back to the Agora Podcast. It's your home for liberty, anti-authoritarianism, decentralization, and all of that. One day, I think we're going to switch up the tagline a little bit, but I think that works for us. I'm still heavy on those things. How you doing, Sec?
Are you tired of saying that tag? You
Yeah, I
want
know.
something
It's almost.
different? Yeah.
Well,
I'm
actually,
doing all
don't
right.
remember it. You're home for. Oh man, we gotta not say liberty though. That was one of those things where like people use that word as a crutch too much. You're on
Yeah, that
for what is
means
it?
a lot of different things to a
Anti-authoritarianism.
lot of different
Just
people.
yeah, and actually that's a great topic. I think we wanted to touch on today because definitely my verbiage and like my ways of viewing my political and philosophical beliefs have certainly changed. A lot of it's the language and the framing, you know. And I've said this like throughout the time I've been recording, and there's been long periods where we haven't been recording, where it's like, I know I said you were going to introduce the topic, but the long periods of time where we've been recording and also not, where I have been really changing how I view, you know, just learning more context, learning more history of political thought. I think is kind of the sub genre. Um, Listening to different politics and framing my politics always differently, and also like not so much changing my views from one thing to a completely different thing, but like seeing them in the context of the political thought a lot differently over time, and really kind of changing my verbiage and the framing of like maybe some of the original content that sort of inspired me to start this podcast. Um, the the kind of language that I know obviously originates with a lot of the thinkers that we kind of were commonly interested in. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that was a good topic to kind of start off with because there's a lot that we haven't talked about because we've had a lot of like topical episodes. I think it's good to have a you and me episode.
Yeah, it's good that we catch up. You know, we haven't caught up in a while. We haven't really done a solo ep in a while. Um, First off, though, we're recording this on the solstice, so let's wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, a Merry Christmas, a happy Yule, and a happy solstice. Just wanted to get that out before I forgot. Is there
Definitely,
any Islamic holidays this time? Where are the Eids? Is that the
it
word for
doesn't.
them, right?
No, it does. Oh, Eid. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm thinking of like the Ides of March, but no. Yeah, they don't. No, it doesn't work that way. So like the Jewish, I guess, work off a lunar calendar where it like resets. So it shifts back a few years and then it resets back and then shifts back again like a typewriter. But the Islamic year is always like 11-ish days shorter. So it's constantly shifting around the calendar
Oh, so,
seasonally,
so
which is
there's nothing,
weird.
nothing this time of the year then.
Yeah, the advantage
No.
is you can look at the moon and tell what the calendar is, which doesn't really work in modern times, but it's worked through the vast majority of human history. So it actually works great if you're not doing calculations and settling on a one calendar. But works really bad when you're also trying to figure things out in sync with the modern style of calendar that has fixed months fixed in the season, and they kind of adjust for the irregular length of the year. So long story short, we are soon we're all the way into having Ramadan in February and March, and it's going to be in
Oh,
all
okay.
February. Basically, it's going to be mostly in February next year, and not this coming, not 26, 27. And back in the 2030s, it's going to be back in December, I guess. That's just kind of how it works.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Keeps you on your toes, I guess. But
Well, I mean, it's made sense the vast majority of human history. But if you want to have a holiday that lands in a certain season, um, I think it worked differently at one point. But if in terms of the calendar way it works now, if you want to have holidays that always are in a certain season, like it's always going to be in the middle of winter, which of course, you know, sort of begs the question with you know, the Christian or the what's it called, the Gregorian calendar. It's like, yeah, well, Christmas is also kind of a winter festival because it's
it
always
is.
in winter.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it always has a
I
winter
mean,
aesthetic. It always has the holly. It always has the trees, which is not exactly about Christ, but hey, it's the idea of like a fixed. Um, so if you're in the northern hemisphere anyway, it's also fixed in the opposite in the southern hemisphere. But the idea that you have a seasonally fixed like holiday thing is something we take for granted, but it's not exactly, you know what I mean? It's not exactly a given because that's not the only way to do a calendar.
for sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, we are not religious. We kind of
Mhm.
celebrate Christmas. I guess sort of like a secular Christmas, you would call it, but we also just celebrate the solstice. We usually light candles every year for, I don't know, the longest night of the winter. But it's just kind of a reminder that you know summer comes around again. Um,
I mean, there's the Christian like religious argument there about these are not. It's not about this isn't about Christ. That's not about Christ. I mean, you don't really hear that too much because it's almost a given. But there's just no way you can separate the idea of Christmas not being a European winter festival. It's all about the winter. It's the Christ thing is important for Christians, but like it's also very important to have a winter festival in a place where it gets really cold and people want to
yep,
cozy up and
yep,
perhaps have a tree, but also do other things that are wintry.
yeah. Have a fire. That mistletoe is European pagan uh, cleansing ritual, is what mistletoe is. Um,
Well, I mean,
again, even
holidays. It makes sense to have holidays around the seasons. Like I
of
totally,
course, yeah.
it's a no
That-
brainer.
That's what basically we celebrate. And we do presents and the Christmas tree and stuff like that. But we basically just celebrate the changing of the seasons. So, um,
Yeah, and despite being technically a born Muslim, I have a very complicated background. And when there's there's a very big Christmas aesthetic growing up, and still in my parents' house and my mom specifically. Um, yeah, it's very complicated, but we work with it. Like I said, and it gives me the perspective of like, yeah, this is all not about Christ. Um, which if it'd be fine if it was, like I have no problem with Christians absolutely go to mass or whatever, or whatever Christian, whatever Protestant service you're gonna have, or if you celebrate Orthodox or whatever Christmas, by all means do that. I guess that's totally great. But like I totally get how the real like emotional connection is really with the winter holiday aspect. And I know my parents' house is done up with electric candles, and like oh my god, just endless amounts of holly and trees and snowmen, and which is, I'm sorry, snowmen has nothing to do with Christ, but still, we're happy to have fellowship in the winter. I mean, I can be pretty conservative religious in terms of like the straightforward interpret beliefs of my religion, but like totally get like why the winter holiday holds a special place in people's hearts, apart from the Christ aspect, which by all means, like if that's your thing, do it.
yeah, to each their own. You know what I mean? Like whatever you like to do, go do that. I'm happy for you. Uh, I wasn't raised religious, but we still had Christmas. You know what I mean? But I guess I'm doing the same thing. Just it's in it. Well, my wife and I were just talking. It's like if we didn't have kids, we probably wouldn't do much for Christmas at all. Um, but the kids enjoy presents, and then we enjoy playing with the kids for several days, playing with their new toys and whatever else, and seeing family and et cetera, et cetera. So, and I had the last few days off. I got to do one day tomorrow, like half day ish, and then I'm off for like a week. So it just gives me an excuse to take some time off and play with the kids.
Nice. Yeah, I've got 3 days off this week. I've got a day and a half off next week. I'm pretty happy in between that and the weekends. I mean, I'm really not working much at the new job, but I'm really happy. We get to be all cozy in, not take things too seriously. We're not really 100% up and running at the company, so we're all just getting our bearings. Like I was telling you before we started, it's kind of a startup company. We're all fresh employees of a fresh, brand new company that's set up and ready to go into business together. So it's been a really cool team building experience, and it's just a real good environment, real much better environment that I'm in than I've been in since I've started this podcast for sure. And just kind of being out there and in a normal office environment really for the first time. I thought my last job was my first office job, but that was not an office job, and that sucked. But anyways, I'm really happy to be kind of just cozy and have my family nearby and have the support of my loved ones for sure.
Yeah, very cool. Um, so yeah, what? So I guess where are your politics at now?
Yeah. Hey, you just
Like,
went
and how have they
you
changed?
you just went mono. Did you just change your position or change the plug on your mic?
No, my phone mic.
No, wait, no, that was me. that was my monitors.
Okay,
Okay. Say something. Okay,
I
perfect.
good now.
Okay. Yeah, that was my plug on my headphones. Okay. Yeah, so my politics haven't drastically changed at any one point during recording this podcast. It just got to a point where I'm less interested in the ideological, the dogmatic politics. Where got to a point where I didn't want to segregate myself off from the broader political and social and cultural discussions, and I haven't found like in terms of doing so, and I really started broadening the scope of the content that I Whoops, sorry about that. I scope a lot of the content that I consume, still a lot of podcasts, but I just felt like I didn't necessarily want to segregate myself from the broader discussions around society and politics, and B I got a better education into how sort of what we call in modern times, or we started to call in the late 20th century, like libertarian politics and the like, and its antecedents, and we've always paid homage to and understood the context, but how its antecedents really fit into the broader story of like political ideology and post ideology, kind of what we're in now. And also, we're in a post ideological age, so I think that age, like where we met, where we were like around these people that were really like into ideology and books and bouncing from like ideology to label, which is more of just a young person thing. I think it's a tendency that I was out of by the time I started doing this podcast. Um, but in terms of being like very dogmatic into these things, instead of saying, "Hey, these guys' dogmas are like their ideas," and then you like pick and choose some of these to varying degrees to influence you. But you don't necessarily subscribe to one guy's system. And I think we've done a good job of like never falling into a trap where like where I've gone has really conflicted in any way. Even when we started the podcast, we called it like I very specifically called it the Agora Podcast, and not the Agorist anything, or like we were saying, not the Liberty anything, which is mostly a due to the fact that that's just so widely overused. But it's not the Agorist podcast; it's the Agora podcast, which is such a cool word. And it's kind of an explanation. Like it's such a cool word for Samuel Konkin to use to name agorism, but it's not the agorism podcast. And we quickly like pivoted heavily to like Carl Hess a lot, which is he's really cool. I think a great inspiration also to go from. And it was like, yeah, okay, this is not going to be the agorist podcast or the anarchist podcast. We're not going to just have anarchists necessarily, but it's definitely you have to be sort of in that anarchic mindset, which is I think a broader thing and a lot differently defined than let's just say anarchism. I mean, anarchism, and I don't know if people have ever noticed, I've never said in an anarchist world, or I've never said I'm an anarchist. Never did that because I've always used vaguer language in that because the way people define anarchism. I mean, I consider myself very anarchistic in my thinking, in a way that like broadly educated people would probably understand that to me. Anarchism, though, as mostly defined people, is a very for one thing, I just disagree with like 95% of people that call themselves anarchists. No, but and I'm not really so sure that there's any value in, like, for example, the really dogmatic Rothbardian people that call themselves anarchists. I understand that that's Rothbard's thing, but that's neither here nor there. Um, but anarchism is often defined as, no, of course, no state. Then there's no God, there's no religion, there's no family. All things what I love. There's no nation, which is that's getting really murky. But generally, we kind of avoid the nationalism, the patriotism. I totally get that. Um, and then there's no money, there's no markets and everything. Well, we changed that because now we're the market anarchists, and then it gets really weird because I like a lot of those things, and I think those things fit with a wholesome community of people, at least that voluntarily choose to do them. And if if you want to abolish the family, then go abolish your family, abolish gender, abolish, um, you know, employment and money and whatever. That's fine, but I don't. It's it's an extreme position, and then of course you'll get people that define it completely differently, and they're like, oh, can you really just redefine words like that? Another thing I really don't consider myself anymore is, or whenever I did used to identify myself, like I'm always trying to figure out how would I talk to like a normal person that's pretty educated in the or even like a socialist, because I'm around some socialists sometimes. Guess what? Just protests going on. Libertarian. That is probably the nastiest word with the worst connotations you can imagine. And you know what? It's very easy to do like a lot of the libertarians that I listen to in podcasts. Not all of them, but a lot of libertarians. And it's defined so differently by so many different people. We're always fighting over this basically almost made up word that was arbitrarily adopted in the when I guess these marketoids lost the word liberal. You just call yourself a liberal. Just call yourself a liberal. Honestly, it's fun. It's a fun little troll, because obviously some people get so pissed off over liberals and liberalism and everything. Yeah, I'm just liberal. I mean, I believe in generally. I mean, I generally believe in individual rights. I generally believe in markets and trading. Another thing I did, I'll let you jump in a sec. But another thing I did is I started bouncing my ideas off of. When I started consuming a lot more, not exactly mainstream content, but like less libertarian content for sure. And it's really eye-opening to see all these different perspectives, and I've kind of mused on this quite a bit before on the podcast. But I started bouncing my ideas off of normies, and I basically alienated my I hate sessions and normies. I alienated my very much non-libertarian, very much statist friends, trying to bring back the word status. And one thing I noticed is like, even people that aren't diehard democratic socialists, I'm around diehard socialists sometimes. But like even for people that are very much center left, kind of just regular status people, even very much moderating, very, very much moderating and being realistic and being pragmatic, even being your most pragmatic. I forgot where I was going with that. Basically, I would never call myself a libertarian, because that's just that evokes a completely opposite set of vibes and attitudes that what attracts me to like free markets and liberty, individual liberty, decentralization, devolution of political power and stuff like that. And I would say I would use a lot of verbiage and ideas that are a lot different than what we started off with the podcast, and sort of the brand of libertarian anarchism that we join with too. I mean, in terms of government versus the state versus the idea of like civil government or governance and everything. I mean, there are anarchists that are anarchists to the point they do not want to be part of it, and that's fine. Like there should be an opt-out option, and you embody that because you live in this world and you live that life. But the majority of us forego some, and we all do to some extent, forego some level of liberty to cooperate with others, to live around others, and so on and so forth. And so I really don't equate the state, the modern Leviathan state, just listen to a podcast on this, by the way, but like the modern Leviathan state, the totalitarian or semi-totalitarian state, this all-encompassing in all parts of our lives, with just the idea of like civil government and governance, even bureaucracy to an extent. I mean, that can occur somewhat outside the Leviathan, and it's not good. I mean, it's not great. Like just like local government, it's not great. It can be more corrupt than like a national faceless huge governmental bureaucracy. But at the same time, like a true anarchist is a person who like attitudinally isn't going to want to take part in that, and that's totally fine. But that's generally in humanity. I mean, we have our individual rights, but we choose to kind of subrogate those to more closely cooperate and live with other people, and I think there's a balance there where what doesn't appeal to me is probably that go live off the grid in the woods alone kind of deal. Like that's got zero appeal to me. But like, hey, how do we cooperate more, cooperate and interact and trade more voluntarily with a minimal amount of coercion, while still enjoying the prosperity and the safety and the fellowship of our neighbors?
So yeah, I got a whole lot to respond to there because I think I overall mostly agree with you here, and I think this is kind of why we've always uh, done well together on this podcast because that was like you said, that was the reason we called it the Agora. And what we said at the time was the Agora was the meeting place, not just for trading goods and services, but also trading ideas and art and culture. That's what the Agora was. They'd have plays and you know uh, something like stand-up comedy and stuff like that, all in the Agora, these Greek marketplaces. And the older I get, the less ideological I am. I mean, I would certainly call myself an anarchist, but I think what I've always kind of been good at is synthesizing different ideas from a wide spectrum of different, thinkers and writers and such. And, the a running theme in this podcast the whole time we've been doing it is I think that most people don't make decisions based on ideology or logical arguments. I think most people make decisions based on a wide variety of things, but largely, material conditions and what works best for them in their own lives. Um, and there's some truth to what you say. Is there's always a trade-off between freedom and cooperation. Uh, I certainly, as a father, understand that. And in becoming a father, I traded, a great deal of personal freedom for um, essentially the benefit of having children. I can't do what I want when I want. Like we were just talking about before. If we didn't have kids, the wife and I wouldn't be doing Christmas. We'd be, in a hot tub in Florida at this point. Just doing whatever, having drinks on a beach or something. And actually, I don't even drink anymore, so that's not true. But you know what I'm saying. And so there is always a trade-off when you cooperate with other humans. I don't think that necessarily negates your own freedom in a way. There's always that you still have the individual choices to make. And I don't like dogma either, man. Like I'm an anarchist in my head. I got rid of all the cops and haunted houses in my head a long time ago. And I'm not, bound by any particular dogma. Um, shit, where was I going with that? I had something I wanted to add to that. Now I just forgot.
Well, I just remembered something that I lost. I went into way too many different little topics there in my opening piece, but I was actually saying, yeah, when I'm talking to like people that are just regular middle of the road, center left kind of status, just Democrats basically, just on average, but I would come to the idea that, oh man, I'm losing again. No, I would come to the idea that I would often be, their status. They want status. Like, why don't we have Medicare for all? Why don't we have like you really think that you want to leave housing and people's health care and their life or death decisions to private corporations and stuff? And I got to the point with that, and actually many other topics in terms of freedom and freedom of speech and stuff. I would often be defending the what so-called conservative position or the status quo. and here I am coming on this podcast, when we're recording, and calling myself like a radical, or at least something like a radical, and then I'd go and talk to like fairly normal-minded people around, basically centered around sort of the basic, like, middle of the road Democratic position, maybe a little bit to the left, maybe a little bit to the right, and I'd often be defending, on just a variety of issues, but especially economic issues. And I'm totally, believe I'm right on this, I'm totally pro free market on all these things. But I would realize, like, I understand what it means to be like a right winger, like not even a right, like a conservative in the 1950s, or like a right winger in Latin America, looking at the communist insurgency that wants to turn my country into a satellite of the USSR and impose like socialism, which I totally don't agree with. Now, I mean, there's more I have to say about that, because I think I've met a lot of socialists that are like swell people. And it's really the statism that I object to, blah, blah, blah. That's a whole nother, that's another topic I want to touch on too. But I would often find myself defending like the conservative position on a lot of things. And it's like, I think we actually have similar ideas of the good in many cases, but a totally different conceptualization and a totally different framework about how stuff works. And it just happens to be that enough people like running this country understand, yeah, actually we need private companies to provide healthcare. Now, a lot of that reason is because they want to enrich the corporations and protect their profits. We obviously know that like statist capitalism, that the way corporations and the state work together is like, and this is what Obamacare was too. I mean, he had no other choice. I mean, this is within the constraints. I guess he did a good job in imposing Obamacare on the country, but like realistically speaking, but yeah, the state does protect the profits of these major stakeholders, these large corporations, these wealthy people that obviously have a say in democratic government and an outsized say in democratic government. That's like the paradox of democratic government, or representative government, liberal government. Maybe it's a little bit less democratic in that sense, but the way we see things works differently. I understand the importance of price signals. I understand the importance of competition. I understand the importance that, yes, you have to have a profit motive. I think profits should be vanishing. It should be small, vanishing, fleeting. I think profits, but you have to have a profit motive. You have to have private property. It's not an evil concept. And we're talking about people who do not like burn down banks. Like they don't. But it's just the idea. They hear private property and like, oh, you darn conservative that wants the poor to starve. You don't think that people should all have health. You think that we should leave healthcare up to who can afford it. And like, it's not like that. I think it should be so plentiful. The marginal cost of just giving out healthcare should be so little that we're more than happy to. And I learned like liberalism, classical liberalism, libertarianism, whatever you want to call it. It is really a continuum. I learned this from people that were very like open-minded and like generous and caring people who are like, look, like we care for the poor so much better in a liberal society. And I mean, this is a partially mixed kind of government, a statist, but liberal capitalist society. We care about the poor so well. There's so much giving. Conservatives, Republicans, or whatever, do give more and do give blood more and blah blah blah. I mean, kind of because they value the role of civil society a little better. And I definitely think like civil society has a role. It's not state totalitarianism, even under a soft liberal system. And we enough people realize, yeah, we got to have like a free market. This is what I tell you. It works for gasoline, essentially. I mean, this heavy state involvement. It works when you go buy a TV. It works when you go buy a video game system, when you go buy a PC or any kind of consumer good. The free market gives us that stuff at such lower cost. So it's so plentiful. We can get it delivered in 48 hours. But you don't think that the most important things, housing and healthcare, should be up to a market. No, we got to have the government get involved. And it's not the communist revolution, but it's like, of course. And it came to the idea of this. I put everybody in talking to like actual statists. I put people into a dichotomy, and this is probably what changed everything. I'm like, man, so you think? I think a lot of people out there honestly think the why. What is the point of private businesses? What is the point of civil society? The more government involved, the better. It's impartial. It's fair. It's helping the disadvantaged. It's helping the needy. It's leveling the playing ground. It's more efficient. It's more rational. All things which I disagree with that framing of all those things. If you're any part of me as a decentralist and a emergent order person, but that's how they see it. So the more government, the better. What part of society should the government be involved in? Why shouldn't there be more government involved? I mean, the more government, clearly the better. And if you think the dichotomy is, if you think anything, there's any limit on government, if there's anything that private businesses, that civil society, that private organizations, that private clubs, that churches, mosques, etc., families, individuals do better than the government. If you think there should be any segregation of like what is the government responsibility, and what's like private actors, we can have a discussion. You're closer to my side than the people that say we need more government, more government, more government perpetually, a perpetual revolution of like soft social democracy, and that's a lot different than the statist libertarian divide under hardcore libertarians. But that's just how I saw it after talking to actual statists.
Listen, man, I don't. There's nothing there that I disagree with, and you. Not to put you in a box or give you a label, but it sounds like you're drawing on classical liberalism and, um, what they would call like free market anti-capitalist schools of thought. I mean, this is the thing, the free market.
Yeah, this is a recap, of course.
Free market.
What's that? Say again.
Yeah, a lot of this is a recap, of course, because I mean, I'm still like, yeah, I'm still off of like market's not capitalism.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think you and I have very different views on those things. I wouldn't necessarily defend, the status quo at all. But I do think that, and we could have a talk about how much the current system actually does benefit us in terms of the cost of goods. I'm not sure that that's actually true, but we'd have to sit down and do the math on that one of these days.
Yeah, but just to clarify, I don't want a socialist solution, and that's the problem. That's the wall that I'm coming up against. It's like, yeah, but I don't want to. So first of all, I have to defend basic concepts like private businesses. I'm totally with you. I think we're in a very similar place in terms of markets, not market
sure.
capitalism, market.
It depends on what you mean by private business, though. You know what I mean? Like, are we talking about?
But the alternatives is let's have a socialist system, and that's disastrous. That's, I mean, I presume that leads to shortage. It certainly leads to a lack of price signals and probably nothing good, and centralization and nothing good as far as we're concerned.
So, I mean, I think you know how much disdain I have for social democracy and progressivism. I think these things are just fascism with a smiley face. And I think that Gabriel Coco was right to call it the triumph of conservatism, and I think Rothbard was right to call it a right-wing plot. I think these things are, I think social democracy and even Marxism, other forms of, state socialism, I think these are, if I had to put a stamp on it, man, these are right-wing and conservative to me. I mean, if you look at the way that Marxists and Maoists view, cultural and social issues, you wouldn't find much difference between them and a evangelical conservative. So I don't really see this as much of a difference. Really, you and I entirely agree on most of this, actually, and I don't even necessarily have an issue with what you would call civil society institutions. I just would like these things to be, emergent and voluntary. If me and my neighbors and everybody on our road, even on the next couple of roads over, want to form some sort of organization for collective action, I don't have a problem with that. I think that would be very useful for a lot of things, for keeping the roads plowed, keeping the poor fed. I also tend to think, and I agree with you, that an actual free market has a, what you call a centrifugal force on wealth, and that it would create such abundance that a lot of these issues would be moot. Like you said about healthcare, it's a free market in healthcare would actually be plentiful. You'd be basically giving it away. It would just be like administrative costs. It would be it would drive the price down so far that it wouldn't be an issue that people have to quote unquote pay for healthcare. And I almost understand the Medicare for all argument at this point. If you look at our, like, I would never advocate for that, and again, I hate social democracy, but compared to what we have now, you know what I mean? Like, healthcare has only just gotten more and more expensive, and you and I know that this is collusion between big business and the government that is at the root cause of all of these things. But and we also know that having the government control healthcare is a dangerous thing, and you're going to have shortages and wait times and all those sorts of things. All of these things I know. But compared to what we have like right now, I mean, I almost understand the argument just because of how fucked our healthcare system is right now.
100%. I've been there multiple times. I totally agree with you.
At some point, you throw your hands up and you're just like, fuck it. You know what I mean? I'm not advocating for that, just for the record, but I understand the argument, in our highly regulated corporate system that we have for healthcare. You know what I mean? What we do need is actually a free market in healthcare. I agree. But like you said, there's a lot of corporate interest involved there. And hey, let me remember to say something. Let me say something real quick before I forgot, because I remember what I was going to say earlier about dogma. So we had a discussion one time on the pod, and this was, years ago, where I was quoting Konkin, and I'm paraphrasing here. I can't remember the exact quote, but he says something like, "You're only an actual agorist if you're basically your entire life and all of your interactions are voluntary." And my quote was like, "That's fucking nonsense." Okay? Because in order to actually do that, if you actually sit down and think about that, you're going to be, like you said, in the woods by yourself, or dead, or in jail. Like, those are the only ways to fit that description. And I'll find you an argument as to why that is if you want. But if you're even using US dollars, you're not really engaging in a voluntary interaction. You're not removing yourself from that system at all, because it's violence that props up that dollar. It's violence that keeps the petrodollar going. I always say that the dollar is backed by metal, but it's tanks and bombs. Do you understand? So it's like, you really can't. Like, my father and I got into this argument one time, and I think I've talked about it on the podcast, but I came over his house for one of the holidays, and we had been on the road because I'd gone to my now ex-wife's parents that morning, and we were on the road, and I stopped at a Dunkin' Donuts, got a coffee, and he gets pissed off because he's talking about how Dunkin' Donuts makes weapons for the government. And what he meant by that is, like, there's some parent company that owns the Dunkin' Donuts IP that then has contracts with the U.S. military. So it's a octopus, man. It's got tentacles in just about everything. And so we got into an argument. I'm like, look, man, and I gave him the dollar bill speech. That I'm like, do you have some U.S. dollars in your wallet? Well, that pays for kids. Bombs getting dropped on kids. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't escape it. Do you have Verizon bill? You want to know who owns Verizon? Like, if you can track down literally any kind of
dealings that you do deal with in sort of mainstream society, and you're going to find a way where that's supporting the system at least in some way. So now my argument and saying all that is not, well, just do nothing. No, you do what you can, but you don't look down on from your high horse on other people. That everybody's doing what they can, and it's nearly impossible to entirely remove yourself from the system. There's just no way. I mean, if you want to go get a piece of property and live off the land, well, guess what? You're paying fucking property taxes, dude. And if you don't, they'll come kill you. And so you got to do what you can, build enough barrier, at least for me. This is me. Everybody can do what they want. But if you want to, liberate yourself and build the foundation for the society you want to see, you just got to do what you can. And you got to sort of build a barrier between, not a barrier, I don't mean that, but a cushion between yourself and the mainstream society as much as you can. And, remove your support from the system as much as you can. That's what we can do. You know what I mean? We have to build the foundations. This is generational. You know what I mean? This is not going to change tomorrow. You removing yourself and getting shot by the feds and being a martyr isn't going to change anything. And so, I mean, listen, I'm a middle-aged man with children, and teenage me would have called current me a pussy and said I should die fighting in the revolution. But we've tried that many, many times over. It doesn't actually work. It doesn't produce the outcomes that we think it does. So this is a slow battle. There's no Jesus in here. You know what I mean? Like there's no perfection. You have to just do what you can, when you can and how you can and however it works for you in your life. And so I think Konkin was wrong. I think if you're trying to build the world you want to see where things are voluntary and you do engage in counter economics as much as you can, I think that makes you, some kind of agorist or a counter economist in some way. And I don't need purity tests. I know what's in my brain. You know what I'm saying? And so just life changes, dude. And I'll give you an example, man. Like when I was a kid, I thought I was going to die fighting the feds in the glorious revolution to overthrow the U.S. government. And really what that was is just me, in my own head, believing that this is the only way to do it. And also, like, I was just a self-destructive kid.
That's kind of healthy when you're a young man, though. That's good. That's testosterone speaking. That's fine.
That's a cry for help. Like, my brain was not in a good space. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, I'll give you an example, and maybe this can lead us into a different topic if you want to, but And I text you the day after this. I'm like, man, I got to stop listening to the fucking news or something. But I was listening to, this was, I don't know, 6 months ago or so now. And I was listening to like an account of a woman pulling her dead babies out of the rubble in Gaza. And I made the mistake of thinking in my head, like, oh God, what if that was one of my kids? And I just got so upset and very angry. I literally, for a brief second, I lost it. And I put my fucking I was mowing. I put my weed eater down. And I started walking to my truck, and I was just going to start shooting people until whoever was responsible for this, I was going to start shooting them until it stopped or I was dead. And just for a brief second, my head snapped because I made the mistake of empathizing too much. I pictured it as my own children for a minute, and just in my head, like, I'm going to die fighting, and I'm going to kill people until this stops. And like, that's what I say when I say I understand terrorism. I really do, because if somebody did that to my children, I would kill every one I could get my hands on that I thought was responsible. So, but what stopped me, and this only happened for like a minute or a minute and a half. I was literally in my truck, ready to go. I had my gun and everything. So just snapped in the middle of just hearing account after account of dead babies in Gaza. But what stopped me is like, listen, you've got your own kids to worry about. You can't die fighting. You're a father. You have responsibilities. So I understand what you say when you say family and civil society, because in some sense that stops you from making very stupid decisions, and acting solely reacting. That's what revolution is, man. It's just reaction. And we have to be smarter than that. We can't just be, mindless radicals. We have to think about these things with some wisdom and build this thing generationally. And if I was a young kid with no kids, I probably would have had a different reaction that day. But the fact that I have my own children that I have to protect and I have to be alive to do that, I made a different decision that day. And don't worry, NSA, I'm not going to fucking do anything crazy. I'm not. That's just not going to happen. But I understand why people get desperate, and I understand why people do very crazy things, and I understand why terrorism exists for that reason, because you kill people's kids, man. Uh, they're going to do very, very desperate and crazy things, and I just understand that. And then the next day I text you, I'm like, I was listening to it all the next day too, and I text you, I'm like, man, I really got to stop listening to the news or something, because I listen to a lot of podcasts that are just like daily news kind of stuff, and I'm like, I gotta fucking stop listening to. I can't hear about Gaza anymore, And I still did listen to it after that, but I was very upset for a number of days, and I made the mistake of telling my wife about it, and she was like, she got scared because she knows how fucking dangerous I can be, but um. Yeah. So anyway, there's no dogma. People are going to do what they can based on the conditions in their own life, and I guess that's where I was going with that.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to touch on, I mean, just going back to something you said kind of earlier. We were talking about socialists, and now I used to always be like, yeah, they're not a member of the Communist Party. I mean, that's just a Democrat. It's just a social democrat. But I know, I mean, if you really think marginally, the more government involvement in every and there's no aspect of society that doesn't benefit from more government, and there's no amount of government that's too much involvement, and there's really no space for civil society, but it's being this thing that's mediated by government involvement in all aspects, however soft and not non-totalitarian the aesthetic of the government is. You're a socialist to me. I mean, really, like, that word doesn't apply. But one thing you said is that, like, socialists, communists and stuff, they're very conservative, and that's always really stuck. It's another thing that I want to tell you that really stuck with me. And on the surface, our argument was always basically about, like, gay people or like women or something like that, like traditional, like, liberal issues, and a very surface level argument. But as the more I went to look at that, I'm like, well, no, I mean, there's this thing called, like, right wing conservatives, of course. There's various different kinds. I mean, really, it's a super broad label. And then there's various, kinds of communists, socialists, and left wing types. But from a liberal point of view, from a liberal pro market point of view, encompassing all the pro market, people, from a very liberal point of view, you can see conservative behavior in terms of being suspicious of, obviously markets and entrepreneurship, money, finance, but also, like, individual liberties. And it's almost a kind of a primitive, just a suspicion that sort of markets capitalism, like sort of free intercourse between people, free speech, stuff like that. And I'm not an absolutist on individual rights. I get practical reality, but this just sort of, I don't know, this sort of superstition against those things, against too much consumption, against, like, we talked about going into the grocery store and seeing the cereal aisle and seeing there's 108 different types of cereal. And, like, that's honestly a miracle. I love having that choice. I get, like, we don't live in a purely fair, fully competitive, but, like, yeah, a little bit, like consumerism is good. I like to enjoy things. Like, I obviously there are some downsides. I mean, the every dollar you spend is a dollar printed by the Federal Reserve with abject bad consequences, not just for crazy gold bugs. I had to learn that the hard way through hours of podcasting. But there's really a thing that's common on the far conservative right and the far right in general, whether it's about immigration and the movement of labor, or whether it's about their views of big corporations, which mirror, and that's because they're probably not really far right. I'm probably more far right than that, but because it's all, these are all made up spectrums that don't exist. But the widespread suspicion of like corporations and their and marketing and stuff like that. And I'm largely like pro business. Obviously, there's downsides of that stuff, but just sort of this superstition, like, oh, they're out to get you. And sometimes I agree with that. Like sometimes they are out to get you. They're in collusion with government. They're inflating the money supply. But when it comes to like a socialist or even like a far conservative or a fascist or something, their objections to like what big businesses are doing, what big business is doing, or what the evil was behind the Wall Street or the U.S. dollar, like it's completely different, and it is based on an absolute superstition against markets and freedom and stuff that largely has actually prevailed to our benefit, as opposed to being another Soviet Union. Not to defend, obviously, the status quo. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a real superstition against like freedom, entrepreneurship, and money, and they're not really able to get our far more nuanced arguments that sometimes actually overlap with them. And another thing, I mean, on the flip side of that, I value certain things. I value the idea of like widespread prosperity and like a relatively, social equality, a relatively egalitarian sort of society that I think we have some good amount of in the United States, but like a relatively egalitarian society, equality before the law, but also like, a society that takes care of the poor and the needy, through one kind of mechanism or another. Family, whether it's family or religion, or if it's the sort of left-wing analogs to that too, you really can kind of group these together. The socialists and the conservatives, they have different specific things they want, but it's very similar. It's very simple, and it's a very strong suspicion and often disdain for like market liberal society. And so for one aspect, I think that's a bad thing, obviously, because I think markets can actually provide healthy communities, social equality, relative prosperity that allows us to all kind of live in some certain level of dignity. We don't have a tremendously hierarchical society. In my daily life, I view myself living in one of the least socially hierarchical societies that's ever existed. I've been in relationships that were lacking that with like a foreign guy, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, wow, I've really taken the amount of like social equality in this society for granted. We're like super casual about hierarchies, maybe not in material senses, but like in our social interactions, like, but animal welfare far better far better in a prosperous and wealthy liberal society than a socialist society. I'm sure in whatever a fascist society looks like, but you know what I mean. Like the idea is like we're actually able to have stronger families. We're able to have more values, have better values and better principles because we're not either like struggling to meet our basic needs, or just simply following the orders of some state commissar, or we're not doing the typical kind of socialist thing where we're just trying to on the sly accumulate certain resources to trade for others and to engage in minor acts of corruption throughout our day to compensate for the lack of access to markets. I mean, it can be a more honest and a more transparent society, and I don't see how socialists and conservatives, who both really uphold a lot of those values, think that those things are actually degraded under capitalism and liberalism, maybe under our neoliberal Fed pumping trillions of dollars sort of system, there's some negative aspects of that. There's some negative. There's certainly some. The Mises Institute's done some great work on that about the negative, even the moral decay that comes from sort of that aspect of state-centric neoliberalism and central banking. But in general, I mean, you could have, and to some extent, we have experienced now and in the past a good amount of like pro-social, pro-community values in a market-based society. And so imagine a freer, more market-based society. You can have all those things. It's not you can opt out and obviously have your own version. I mean, we're talking about communities based on consent. But yeah, I don't see how an actual far conservative or truly socialist society has ever existed that has exemplified those values better than a market society where people can sort of have the freedom and the room and the prosperity, the actual resources and comfort to actually engage in those things better. And yes, obviously, my ideal society is much freer than the status quo. But I certainly don't want to move in either of those two directions.
Yeah, so I've been, I don't know, trying to parse out how I kind of feel about this because, on the one hand, I kind of appreciate this resurgence of a particular kind of right winger that is skeptical of big business and is skeptical of materialism and consumerism. I kind of appreciate that better than sort of the pro big business, pro corporate, everything is good as long as the line goes up on the graph, sort of Reaganite conservatives of the past that I'm used to dealing with.
You're right, and
so,
where you're going is where I've been wanting to go for a long time. So I'm glad you're going there.
And sure, they are also pretty anti-market, and a lot of that is because yes, they confuse what exists with an actual free market, and I agree that those are not the same thing. Now, I think these right wingers, and they're also anti-war, oddly enough. I think these are preferable to the Reaganites, for sure. However, they are also anti-market, and I agree with what you said about, hey man, I love free markets. I love prosperity. I love abundance. I love cheap stuff. I love entrepreneurship and innovation and people that figure out new inventions, and I love all of that stuff. That stuff is amazing to me. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a small business owner. I work very hard at what I do and I make decent money doing it. And it's entirely on my, decision making and, how whether I do well or I don't. So I have an appreciation for all of that. And even cheap shit's good because it allows, the poor to buy things that they wouldn't otherwise be able to buy. But I think in our current society, and a lot of this is because, like you said, it has to do with the collusion between corporations and the government, and yes, our artificial credit expansion and artificial money supply, and the inflationary money system. But I think there is a big problem with, and I would call it consumerism. And I don't just mean like cheap consumer goods, but the idea that like having cheap shit is a good in and of itself. And the line going up on a graph is the best metric for how well, particular people or society are doing. I also am very skeptical of like the hyper specialization of our current society, where
no one really has any, you know, nobody has any meaning anymore to what they do in their life. And the goal, it seems like the end goal for a lot of people is just more cheap plastic shit, and not the value that it brings to you and your family, and the quality time that you can spend because things are cheaper, like, because you are more productive, you can spend more time with your family. And I think all of these things would be true in a free society with an actual free market, but that's not what exists. I mean, we have microplastic in our balls right now, and a giant garbage patch in the ocean. You know what I mean? Like, there's there's costs here, and no one's happy. Mental illness is through the roof. Nobody has any social connections anymore. Like, well, all of these criticisms that this new breed of conservative uh, point out, they're true. They're just they think it's they're pointing at the wrong root cause, I would say. And I think you're correct in that an actual free market, we would be able to actually have more time to spend. Like, everybody's working so fucking hard, and everybody's got to have the new iPhone every fucking year. And even though it's basically the same as a piece of shit as the last one. And listen, I've got kids. I mean, my daughter's got my body weight in stuffed animals. You know what I mean? Like, there's just constant shit to buy that just breaks after fucking 3-4 months or 6 months or whatever. And it's all just like cheaply made garbage, and it's lesser quality than it was last year. So there is there is a problem there. However, I think, again, a free market is oddly the answer, because not only will it make like, having things cheaper means you need to work less to acquire the things that you need and want, right? At least that's how it should be in an actual free market. But for some reason, things being cheaper, I mean, I'm not even sure that things are cheaper, actually. I think they're just cheaper made. And maybe me and Brian should sit down and talk about this, because if you go to like a refrigerator in the 80s, sure, it was, if you adjust for inflation, it's cheaper than a current refrigerator is cheaper now than it was then. But that fridge from the 80s would have outlasted my lifetime. Whereas a fridge now, you're lucky you're getting 5-10 years out of that thing. You know what I mean? So everything is like disposable in a weird way. Nobody has any real attachment to creating any particular product. Very few people. I do. I see the jobs start from start to finish, and then I get paid for it. I see it come to fruition with my own two hands. Most people don't have that. Most people, you're turning the same bolt over and over again. You're shuffling the same fucking papers every week, whatever the thing is. That's how it is for most people. And, there's been lots of words that have come up around this, and shitification from Cory Doctorow, bullshit jobs from David Graeber, rest in peace. And so there's lots of terms that have been coined to describe these things. But I think the conservatives are right to criticize our current system and its waste, and sort of gross materialism, like the way that we judge the health of our own well-being in society is how much shit we have, is kind of an odd way to do it. The reason I like these things, I like cheap shit, I like abundance, and I like entrepreneurship and free markets and all these things, is because it should improve our lives and improve human fruition. And you're right. If you go from like the 1800s to now, the average person is better off. But if you go from like the 50s to now, we've actually gotten worse, and the externalities have gotten worse. And all of our food and water is poison. And it's that old joke, it's the kid at a science fair, right? And it says above it, they turn the picture of this kid into a meme, and above it says modern capitalism. And basically, the kid did an experiment for the science fair. It says, how much sawdust can I put in the Rice Krispies before people will notice? And that was his science experiment. And above, they put on the meme, basically modern capitalism. And that's shrinkflation is what that is. It is from the monetary supply, but things aren't getting cheaper. They're just putting more garbage into it so they can serve it to you cheaper. Do you know what I mean? I do have a problem with all this consumerism. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think social media and the internet's very healthy for most people. I've got 2 little girls, man, and to try to keep them away from the horrific shit on the internet is very hard. It has a lot of issues, but go ahead. But I got to wrap in 15 though, by the way, just with...
Yeah. It's probably the same. So I definitely do agree that there's sort of major problems with capitalism. Academic Marxists actually probably can point some of these out as well as others. The need for constantly increase profits and shareholder value, stuff like that, really kind of hurting us at the very high level. Obviously, we believe the fundamentals of markets work. I just do think that when you look at these, the sort of the growth and the vibrancy and the sort of new ground is being broken on the right. But when you look at these new conservatives that are kind of, I don't want to use the term woke right, but they're really like right-wing conservative analogs to like socialist leftists, traditionally who would point out these views. And I'm sure there have been people on the right in the past. There have been some antecedents to this, of course, but largely the thing that you would consider the commies to point out that that look how great we had when we have all these factories. Look, a factory worker could support this and this and they can do that and everything. Look how much better made our products were, how better our infrastructure was, and everything like that. You can be a commie or a conservative and point out the same things, and a lot of it ignores the realities and the facts. It's a lot more complicated, a lot more nuanced. And if you really, I don't know, it's hard for me to come up with a concrete example, but a lot of this stuff's just kind of like vulgar superstition that's not looking at the real root causes of the things. And I love when people are able to be educated enough, because I barely understand a lot of issues, specific issues. I understand some big ones like the Fed, monetary inflation, obviously, but when it comes down to it, like the issues like that have really kind of led to the situation we're in now. It's not capitalism. It's not minorities. It's not feminism. It's mostly minorities now. It's actually just mostly the Somalis and blacks are ruining everything on the right now. It's almost become nothing else. But it is becoming very much similar to, on the left, what have we been living with? It's continuing to be men and white people and are the cause of all the problems. And it's very, I see these people as like ideologically primitives. They're very primitive. They're ooga booga superstitious people. And when there's actually explanations, but if I have to sit here and explain to you how it's actually the Fed and it's actually big finance's fault and it's actually Wall Street's fault, and it's not because we charge money to access goods and services, then that's actually a good thing. It's not done because we're mean and want to prevent people that can't afford stuff. But even if you understand the basics of markets, like let's say somebody else on the right that has some basic understanding of, we need markets for resource allocation needs, they still miss fundamental things that are causing us to be in a situation we are in terms of, no, you know what? It's the housing supply. It's the housing supply. It's the lack of competition. It's the overregulation. It's the fact that we only have a middle class because they're able to achieve returns in their rapidly rising housing values. So you dump all your savings into the house to beat the home to beat inflation, and we can't have more homes because that would ruin the path to middle class, financial security. And and it gets a little complicated. And then there's actually myths that they're a little more complicated that take root, like BlackRock or Blackstone are buying up all the housing stock. Well, that's not really what's happening. It's actually a lot more fun. I mean, they bought up very little of the housing stock actually. The problem, and they're not holding it off the market because they don't have the ability to just, for whatever cruel, evil reason, because they're evil or Jewish, whatever, depending on if that's your flavor of conspiracy theory, that they just want to like deprive us of housing, which seems to be very commie, other than its particular right-wing flavors, the aesthetics of the arguments. And you do see like bipartisan kind of populist push against these firms, which are bad. I believe me, they have their very negative aspects, but it's like, actually, that's not why we're in a housing crunch. That's not why people can't afford housing. That's not why we're in an asset price bubble. That actually has nothing to do with it. At best, it's partially a co-symptom of the same problems, and they're endemic to the system that we live in. And I'm just as much of a radical as the most radical, obviously, commie, because the fundamentals of our system are obviously broken from the liberal market values that we like, that's based on actual money and actual competition, and require those things in order to proceed. But of course, there comes the other problem of like, hey, if you don't have profit motive, if you don't have competition, if the solution is to move into a socialist direction, that can lead to like irreversible, obviously, what I'm assuming is going to be irreversible negative change, and I will fight to prevent that. That's not something I want, as much as I have disdain for the status quo and the current system that we have. But like you mentioned, like these new right wingers, like Tucker Carlson types, essentially, like broadly speaking, like, yeah, they're suspicious of markets, they're suspicious of consumerism, some in good ways, some in kind of bad ways. And it goes only worse from there. And on the flip side is another thing I wanted to point out before I give it back to you, we start to close up, is like the sensible, moderate, pro-market kind of guy, center-right, whatever kind of guy, and this goes ditto for the center-left too. The moderates, people that actually kind of get it on some things, not certainly avoiding a lot of the kookery that sort of, I mean, we have our own kookeries, but like, the kind of kook partisan stuff that really kind of gets in the way. And maybe you actually understand market economics pretty good and actually have a pretty good grasp on like some more old school kind of conservatism, or if they're like a center left, like they're not social, they're Democrats, but they're not socialists. They get the need for a market economy, which, I mean, that's a lot more frank to the system that Democrats actually support. Okay, they're sensible moderates. They're not going off saying all of these wild and salacious and offensive things, especially on the conservative side. Like those sensible market classical liberals and the classical liberal think tankers and the classical liberal this and that, every one of them, hands down, Zionist, Israel supporter, military industrial complex supporter, apologist for Wall Street and everything. And that's why I'm over here with the libertarians. Because it's your moderates that will back support every war. I mean, who are the biggest? I was just at an anti-war protest yesterday, or for Gaza, and it was talking about the Squad and on the right, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey, and their lack of APAC connections, and it's like, yeah, well, there's moderates. Who are our moderates? The moderate voices are John McCain and John McCain and all Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney and all these sensible people in the middle, bipartisans that supported every war, every bomb dropped, every aircraft carrier built, every $10 billion, $20 billion, $30 billion aid package to Israel. And I'm sure they actually understand. I'm sure they understand market economics really well, but at least a version of it. But look at what else they support. So it's really hard to find people that have the right combination of grasp on things, even just enough to even listen to them, to subscribe to their podcast to like say, hey, this person really knows what they're talking about. It's honestly really tough because you look at some of these new voices, even if you're looking at on the right in the podcast on the podcast right, and I mean they're not so friendly to markets or open minded cosmopolitan values. And I don't even mean in a traditional left wing way, but I'm a cosmopolitan guy. And I don't like to hear all this stuff about our friends that are immigrants and stuff like that. Not to comment exactly on my position on immigration, but I love them. I mean, it's what this country's made out of.
Yeah, I mean, desperate times makes desperate people do desperate things. Like back like even I at this point with all this stuff going on in Gaza, I'm like, look, the UN just needs to abolish Israel entirely and make that whole area just an international city like the Vatican or some shit. I don't know. It can't go on like this. You know what I mean? And sure, my choice would be a no state solution for sure. But even I at this point, like, this can't go fucking on anymore. And the UN just needs to literally abolish the state of Israel and turn that whole place into a international city where all people are welcome to come and pray or worship in whatever way they choose. But that's never going to happen either. But there's back to like, okay, so Tucker Carlson's thing is, man, young kids they just can't afford to buy a house. It's fucking nuts. And you're right, they have a suspicion around markets and whatnot. Listen, I've heard arguments from both sides of the quote unquote the libertarian aisle, from your left market anti-capitalist types to your gold money Rothbardian right libertarians or whatever, and they've all come to the same conclusion that in a free market, real estate would be a depreciating asset. Actually, meaning you would buy a house and it would be less valuable. It would get cheaper over time because it's a depreciating asset. And they both come to the same conclusion. Both of these, very different people come to it for the same conclusion, some for slightly different reasons. The Kevin Carson types would be like, well, this is all due to just artificial scarcity through different legal frameworks and local building codes and all these sorts of things. And the the gold money types would come to it this is all due to inflation. That's why your house is not worth more. Dollars are worth less. And actually, they're both fucking right. And some would say that it's actually both things. And I would tend to agree with that. It's actually both things. It's artificial scarcity, and also it's the inflationary money, and that's why the house you bought for 300,000 20 years ago is worth fucking 7 now. It's not because it's actually worth that much more money, or it's not worth that much more wealth. It's because the money was worth nothing, in comparison to the back then. Whereas a house literally should be like a car, where it's worth less and less every year. So again, the answer, even for people like Tucker Carlson, is a free market. It's a radically free market. You have to remove the restrictions that only tend to benefit the actual existing wealth holders that currently exist. That's what all of these regulations and restrictions benefit. So if we had a free market in property, this wouldn't be an issue. And I will say, like, one other thing about the sort of the free trade thing. Listen, I'm a free trade guy. I want to be able to trade with anybody in the world. And, these people are worried about their factories that left their towns. Well, listen, I think like we should automate all the factories. Nobody should have to work in a factory. Okay. I think that's a good thing for all of us. But there is something to be said about having sort of local institutions, whether that be economic, like a factory, or something else, where everybody in your town all kind of goes to the one of 4 or 5 different places, and everybody knows each other, and you have good local connections, and you're your supply chains are much local. This is all good things. It's actually crazy that it's cheaper to ship things around the entire world than it is to make it right next door to you. The reason for that is because the state has intervened into the market. That's not a free market phenomenon. Now, we would still have to ship some things from around the world, like we've talked about coffee before. We'd have to ship coffee from Asia or South America. That's not going to grow around here. But for many, many things, especially like, cheap consumer goods, it actually doesn't make sense that it's cheaper to send it from China. That's not a free market thing. That's because of the military. First of all these government trade deals, including NAFTA and all these sorts of things. It's all that. It's the inflationary money supply. It's also because the U.S. is the world reserve currency, and it's also the military controlling the shipping lanes, which makes it artificially cheaper to ship things. If you had to pay for your own security to ship things from China to here, it might be a different story. It might be cheaper to get them where you are.
And of course, there's the Chinese government's intervention is a huge part of it
exactly.
as well.
Yep. And so, like, it's on the one hand, it's like they're pissed about cheap Chinese goods coming here and their communities no longer having some sort of backbone or institution like a factory. Because, a factory wasn't just a job, back in the day. You knew everybody from the town, or a lot of people from the town worked at the factory. You all got off at the same time and you went and had beers, and then your families got together. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it was more than just a job, and you were paid, decently. Like, a person with no education could make a decent middle class living doing that. Now, I'm not saying let's bring the factories back. I don't want to bring them back. I think we should automate all of them. Do you know what I mean? Automate all of them, but we should have more local supply chains. And I think having more community institutions and personal relations with your local community is a good thing. And I think, like I said, it doesn't actually make sense that things are cheaper coming from Vietnam or Mexico or far, far away. Think of all that shipping cost, and still it's cheaper than stuff that's made right next door. No, that's due to government intervention. That's not an actual free market phenomenon. And I think in a free market, these things would resolve themselves. But people are desperate, man. Like, people can't afford a house. They have $300,000 in debt from college, and there's no jobs for that particular whatever they went to school for, and they'll never be able to own a house. That makes young folks very desperate, and desperate people do desperate things, like call for, like, well, fuck it, the government's going to pay for it then. You know what I mean? Like, I understand why they're upset. You know what I mean? So, but again, the answer is the free market. But like you said, it's a much more complicated story than just saying it's the fucking immigrants or whatever the thing. You know what I mean? Or it's the capitalists or everything. So.
Yeah, and these things really do mirror what on the left and the right. I mean, it's very much the same kind of thing.
You're muted.
Oops, sorry. Yeah. Okay. I kind of lost where I was going to go with that. I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but
yeah, let's wrap it there. I think that was good.
I think it was a very productive discussion. I've really got able to. I thought I was going to get stuff off my chest and kind of, move. I mean, I've been really happy when we have been recording, and sometimes we go through periods where we don't record a lot. But when we have been recording, how much we've kind of kept up a lot of concordance between you and I, and where we're at, and where we're in our lifestyles, and how we actually apply, not necessarily what we think in our heads and what we've read in the past, but how we actually apply our ideas and values in our own lives. I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is actually very practical. This actually might make sense. But as we've been talking, I mean, we really actually have recapitulated stuff that we were touched a lot of the same stuff. Pretty much everything we've talked about is recapitulating stuff that we have talked about in the past, especially like 3 or 4 years ago when we were kind of fresh doing this and kind of staking our positions on this, and kind of just stronger than ever. We're for free markets and liberty, I guess. Maybe we should stop using the word liberty. I know some people even in the libertarian sphere just tune out the word liberty when you kind of over spam that. But no, I mean, I think that's kind of the solution, as opposed to moving in the direction of socialism. So there's always that big tension of like, oh, I don't actually think we should have a centralized state-oriented solution to this problem. Here's why I think the fundamentals of markets work. Here's why we don't have that. And you know what? It's actually a more complicated discussion to explain what differs this kind of neoliberal reality from like the market liberalism that we stand for. Again, I'm not using the word libertarian, because that people really do think libertarianism is libertarianism. It's guns and weed. It's guns and weed. It's just do whatever you want. It's licensed, and it's not even licensed like, oh, I'm a conservative, I don't think we should have all that. No, I mean, people have misrepresented libertarianism just to mean you can personally act in a reckless way however you want without regard to like wider society. I'm like, that's not what that means. But it's been a mistake of branding. So again, I'm here for the free markets. Yes, the free markets could allow for that. If you so choose, free markets can also allow for a lot of other things. Most importantly is, and this is where decentralization comes in, there is a minimalization, like I was saying on the episode with Brandon, a minimalization of coercion. There's essentially less people being forced to live against their wishes because there is more choices, there is more decentralization, and that means there's less people yoked into something larger than them. So I think, again, the solution is still radical decentralization, as we actually said. I was missing that term earlier. Radical decentralization, devolution of power, obviously no over-reliance on democracy and voting at scale for a variety of reasons. And I mean, there are really bullet points here. But the true democracy is probably just devolution of power and decentralization. And basic free market processes in the way we use the term, which is really, really expansive, obviously, but I think totally valid and defensible.
Yeah, I certainly agree with all that. But yeah, I gotta turn in there. But this was good. I'm glad we fleshed this out, and I think we pretty much agree on most things, so that works out. But everybody listening, have yourself a good holiday and be excellent to each other, and be nice to everybody else.
Ciao.
Peace.